Some people worship discipline like a private religion. They wake before sunrise, rigid, efficient, emotionally distant. Their control impresses everyone, until something cracks. The crack rarely looks dramatic at first. It begins quietly, somewhere closer than expected. Beneath discipline, another motive has been hiding. The cultural story says discipline is strength, that forcing yourself forward builds character, that pressure produces greatness. Yet the nervous system tells a quieter story beneath the applause. What appears as iron will often begins as threat detection, a body scanning for danger and stillness, interpreting rest as exposure, interpreting softness as risk. Psychologist Carl Jung observed that what we push into shadow does not disappear, it reorganizes itself underground, shaping behavior while remaining unnamed. In this light, relentless discipline can resemble vigilance more than virtue, a survival adaptation disguised as productivity. A man sits at his desk long after midnight, eyes burning, jaw tight, rewriting the same paragraph repeatedly, convinced that stopping would invite collapse he cannot define. He calls it commitment, colleagues call it dedication, yet his shoulders never lower even when the work is finished. The body does not distinguish between a predator and a deadline when both are encoded as threat. Evolutionary psychologists suggest our ancestors survived through constant environmental scanning, where a single lapse in attention could mean death rather than inconvenience. In modern rooms with artificial light and glowing screens, that same circuitry can attach itself to unfinished tasks, transforming incomplete goals into imagined predators. A student schedules every hour of the weekend, color-coded, optimized, leaving no margin for drift, feeling a pulse of anxiety whenever empty space appears. Friends admire the organization, parents praise the maturity, yet the silence between activities feels intolerable, almost dangerous. Behavioral scientist B.F. Skinner noted that behaviors reinforced by relief become powerful, and relief often follows action more reliably than praise. When action reduces anxiety, even temporarily, the brain records discipline as safety. Over time, the pattern tightens, not because the person loves effort, but because stillness begins to resemble vulnerability. A woman finishes a demanding project, receives recognition, then immediately volunteers for another assignment before the applause fades. The compliment lands briefly, but the internal pressure returns faster than satisfaction. Discipline here is not aspiration, it is anesthesia. From the outside, this pattern looks admirable, almost enviable, especially in cultures that equate busyness with worth. Yet internally, it can feel like running on a treadmill that punishes deceleration. Psychiatrist Viktor Frankl described how meaning can transform suffering, but when effort is detached from meaning, strain becomes circular rather than purposeful. Forced discipline often lacks this anchoring meaning, operating instead as a preemptive strike against anticipated failure. A child once learned that mistakes brought sharp criticism, that relaxation invited scrutiny, that excellence reduced noise in the household. Years later, the adult version calls it high standards, unaware the standards were first constructed as emotional armor. The armor remains long after the battlefield has changed. In meetings, the disciplined individual volunteers first, speaks crisply, delivers early, yet monitors reactions constantly, searching for micro signs of disapproval. The vigilance hums beneath the competence, rarely visible but rarely silent. What is labeled self-control may actually be fear refined into routine. Neuroscience shows that repeated stress responses strengthen neural pathways, making urgency feel familiar and familiarity feel safe. Eventually, calm states feel foreign, even suspicious, as though something important is being neglected. A runner increases mileage despite recurring injury, interpreting pain as weakness rather than information. The body signals exhaustion, but the identity built around toughness refuses negotiation. The injury worsens quietly, mirroring a deeper fracture between sensation and permission. Discipline enforced through self-coercion creates an internal hierarchy, where one part commands and another obeys under threat. The commanding voice sounds rational, strategic, future-oriented, yet its tone often resembles the echo of earlier authority. Over time, the obedient part adapts by numbing, complying, or rebelling in subtle ways. Procrastination can emerge not as laziness, but as resistance to internal domination. Binge behaviors sometimes follow periods of extreme control, not as moral failure, but as nervous system backlash. The cycle confuses observers who see only inconsistency, missing the tug of war happening beneath performance. What we call lack of discipline after burnout may actually be the system protecting itself from chronic internal pressure. The backfire is not accidental, it is regulatory. When force becomes the primary motivational tool, the psyche searches for escape routes. These routes may look irrational on the surface, yet they often serve equilibrium. Control applied without attunement eventually destabilizes the very stability it seeks to secure. And beneath the polished routines, an older story waits, one that began long before productivity became a personal brand. If you're still watching, you probably notice things most people miss. You question behavior. You look beneath the surface. If that sounds like you, subscribe. This channel was made for minds like yours. Long before planners and performance metrics, the pattern was forming quietly. A child sits at a kitchen table, homework spread carefully, listening for the subtle shift in a parent's footsteps, adjusting posture before the door fully opens. The air in the room feels conditional, approval hovering like weather that can change without warning. When praise arrives, it is precise and narrow, tied to achievement rather than presence, teaching the nervous system to equate performance with safety. Attachment researchers have long noted that children adapt exquisitely to emotional climates, calibrating behavior to maintain connection even at personal cost. In some homes, affection expands when results impress, then retracts when effort falters, creating a fragile equation between worth and output. A report card with high marks softens voices at dinner, while a single lower grade tightens conversation into sharp instruction. The child studies not only mathematics, but the micro-expressions of approval, learning that discipline reduces relational volatility. Evolutionary psychologists suggest belonging once determined survival. Exile meant danger. Therefore, children evolved hypersensitivity to cues of acceptance. When belonging feels uncertain, self-regulation intensifies as a strategy to secure proximity. A young athlete misses a goal during practice, hears laughter from peers, then spends the evening rehearsing drills alone in the backyard until dusk disappears. The extra practice is framed as ambition, yet underneath lies a fear of humiliation repeating itself. The brain records embarrassment as social threat, activating the same circuitry once reserved for physical peril. Over time, repetition strengthens association. Effort equals protection, rest equals exposure. In classrooms where comparison is constant, subtle hierarchies form early, ranking intelligence, speed, charisma, shaping identities before language fully matures. A child praised as the responsible one begins monitoring siblings, absorbing adult expectations, abandoning playfulness to maintain the family equilibrium. Responsibility becomes identity, identity becomes obligation, obligation becomes internal command. Psychologist Alfred Adler proposed that feelings of inferiority can drive compensation, sometimes toward excellence, sometimes toward relentless overcorrection. The overcorrection feels empowering at first, providing structure in environments that once felt unpredictable. Yet the structure is rigid, designed not for growth, but for defense. A teenager discovers that staying busy limits intrusive thoughts about conflict at home, so extracurricular schedules expand until weekends vanish. Busyness dampens anxiety temporarily, reinforcing the strategy through relief rather than joy. Behavioral loops tighten, and discipline merges with emotional avoidance. In families where emotions are dismissed as weakness, children learn to translate vulnerability into productivity. Tears are replaced with task lists. Confusion is converted into measurable goals. The nervous system adapts by muting softer signals, amplifying performance-based cues instead. Psychiatrist Donald Winnicott described the development of a false self constructed to meet environmental demands, often at the expense of spontaneous experience. Forced discipline can operate as a polished version of that false self, competent and admired, yet distanced from internal states. A young adult leaves home for the first time, free from direct scrutiny, yet still wakes before dawn with a racing mind, driven by an invisible supervisor. No one is watching, yet the body behaves as though evaluation is imminent. Internalized authority does not require external enforcement. Even evolutionary pressures contribute subtly. as scarcity in ancestral environments rewarded those who stored resources and prepared excessively for winter. Modern equivalence becomes savings goals, career milestones, physical optimization, pursued with urgency that outpaces actual necessity. The survival brain cannot easily distinguish between seasonal famine and quarterly performance review. A university student experiences a rare unstructured afternoon, sunlight entering through open windows, yet anxiety rises without a defined objective. The absence of task feels like an error in the system, as if something essential is being neglected. Early unpredictability often wires the system toward hyper-predictability later. Control becomes a shield against chaos remembered but not consciously revisited. Psychologist John Bowlby emphasized that early attachment disruptions echo into adult regulatory strategies, shaping how safety is pursued. For some, safety is pursued through closeness, for others through independence, and for others through relentless self-governance. Self-governance can appear noble, yet its origin may trace back to moments of helplessness quietly endured. A child who once waited for tension to subside may grow into an adult who preempts tension by eliminating every possible mistake. Perfection is less about excellence and more about avoiding emotional flashbacks. The pattern solidifies across years, praised by teachers, rewarded by employers, admired by peers, rarely questioned because it produces visible results. But beneath the visible results, the body continues operating on outdated maps. The original environment may be gone, the evaluators replaced, the stakes reduced, yet the survival code remains active. Discipline enforced through self-pressure thus carries ancestral echoes and childhood negotiations intertwined. It is not born from laziness corrected, but from uncertainty managed. And when this pattern enters social space, it does not remain private. It shapes relationships in ways that reveal its hidden cost. It is easier to see it in someone else first. A colleague arrives before everyone, leaves after lights dim, answers messages within minutes, subtly tightening the pace of the entire team without saying a word. Others feel slightly slower around them, slightly less prepared, though no criticism has been spoken aloud. The disciplined presence alters the atmosphere, raising an invisible standard that hums between desks. In group projects, this person volunteers for the most complex portion, then quietly redoes parts completed by others late at night. No confrontation occurs, only silent correction, efficiency layered over unspoken distrust. Friends describe them as reliable, dependable, solid, yet gatherings feel scheduled rather than spontaneous. When dinner runs long and laughter drifts without agenda, their eyes flick briefly toward the clock. Time not optimized begins to resemble waste, and waste carries the old scent of danger. In romantic relationships, discipline can masquerade as emotional stability, organized routines replacing unpredictable intimacy. A partner expresses sadness after a difficult day, and the response arrives structured and solution-oriented, devoid of lingering softness. The conversation resolves efficiently, yet something unnamed remains untouched. Psychologist Carl Rogers emphasized the healing power of presence without evaluation, yet forced discipline often defaults to evaluation first. Even affection becomes calibrated, expressed through acts of service rather than vulnerable disclosure. A parent who once survived chaos through control now schedules their child's week meticulously, ensuring every hour is productive. The child learns piano, language lessons, structured sports, with little room for boredom or wandering curiosity. The parent calls it opportunity, yet beneath it lives a fear that unstructured time breeds weakness. At family gatherings, the disciplined individual cleans dishes before dessert is finished, unable to sit fully in idle conversation. Relatives praise their helpfulness, while sensing a quiet distance that never quite dissolves. Control protects against the discomfort of unscripted interaction. In friendships, invitations are accepted only if calendars align precisely, spontaneity negotiated like a contract. When plans change abruptly, irritation surfaces quickly, disproportionate to the inconvenience itself. The nervous system interprets unpredictability as a return to earlier instability. Behavioral scientist B.F. Skinner noted that reinforcement shapes patterns invisibly, and social approval reinforces discipline displays repeatedly. Colleagues promote the reliable one, partners lean on the steady one, families depend on the responsible one. Each reward strengthens the persona, even as internal tension accumulates quietly. A manager praises an employee for never taking sick days, admiring stamina, unaware the employee fears appearing dispensable. The compliment lands as confirmation that constant output equals security. Over time, relationships reorganize around this output, expecting consistency without noticing strain. Conflict becomes particularly revealing. When disagreement arises, the disciplined individual may retreat into composure so tight it feels impenetrable. Voice steady, posture upright, arguments framed logically, yet emotional undercurrents remain unspoken and unresolved. Others experience this steadiness as coldness, or superiority, or subtle judgment. The disciplined one experiences it as containment necessary to prevent collapse. A partner attempts playful teasing, but the response arrives serious and corrective, humor interpreted as inefficiency. Laughter fades slightly, replaced by careful wording. The social cost emerges not through dramatic rupture, but through gradual narrowing of emotional bandwidth. Psychiatrist Viktor Frankl described the human need for meaning, yet meaning in relationships often arises from shared vulnerability rather than optimized performance. When vulnerability feels unsafe, connection becomes structured rather than organic. Even celebrations carry undertones of management. At a birthday gathering, the disciplined host moves constantly, refilling glasses, adjusting music, coordinating conversations, rarely sitting long enough to be celebrated. Guests feel grateful, yet slightly unable to reach the person orchestrating everything. Control creates distance while appearing generous. In workplaces driven by metrics, this pattern can evolve into subtle power. Those who endure the longest hours set the implicit norm, shaping expectations without formal authority. Others adapt or withdraw, sensing that rest now signals weakness within the group. The disciplined individual becomes both model and pressure source simultaneously. People first notice the rigidity in tone, the intolerance for delay, the faint impatience with emotional ambiguity. It appears as intensity, sometimes as inspiration, sometimes as quiet domination. Rarely does anyone trace it back to a survival strategy rehearsed for decades. And somewhere beneath the polished interactions, fatigue gathers, unseen but cumulative. Modern environments will not only notice this pattern, they will amplify it beyond recognition. Sometimes, watching it in others feels uncomfortably familiar. The environment now rewards what once merely protected. Smartphones vibrate with reminders, metrics, streaks, subtle digital applause for consistency, transforming private discipline into publicly quantified virtue. Applications track sleep, steps, productivity, focus intervals, offering graphs that convert human fluctuation into data points. The disciplined nervous system finds validation in these numbers, mistaking measurement for meaning. A professional checks email before leaving bed, scrolling through overnight updates, heart rate rising slightly with each unread message. The day begins not with orientation to self, but with immediate response to demand. Technology collapses distance between effort and evaluation. Performance feedback once arrived weekly or annually. Now it appears instantly through notifications, likes, rankings, and algorithmic visibility. Each small signal reinforces urgency, conditioning the brain toward perpetual readiness. Behavioral economists describe incentive structures shaping behavior predictably, and modern platforms are incentive structures disguised as tools. They reward frequency, speed, responsiveness, consistency, all qualities aligned with forced discipline. A content creator uploads daily without pause, analytics dashboards open constantly, interpreting minor dips as existential threat. Rest days feel like disappearance, and disappearance feels like loss of relevance. The ancient fear of exile now wears digital clothing. Corporate culture often celebrates burnout as commitment, praising those who answer messages during vacation, subtly redefining boundaries as negotiable. Performance reviews highlight resilience under pressure, rarely questioning the pressure itself. The disciplined employee internalizes these cues, accelerating to match an already unsustainable pace. Open offices and remote dashboards blur distinctions between work and personal space, extending the arena of evaluation into bedrooms and weekends. Even leisure becomes optimized, transformed into side projects, fitness challenges, skill acquisition goals. A weekend hike is logged, photographed, compared, and improved upon next time. Experiences shift from felt moments to measurable achievements. Psychologist Eric Fromm wrote about the shift from being to having, and modern discipline often aligns with having more metrics rather than inhabiting more presence. The individual accumulates accomplishments, yet the sense of arrival remains deferred. Scarcity narratives embedded in economic systems amplify this drive. Headlines emphasize competition, instability, rapid change, implying that constant improvement is the only defense against obsolescence. The survival brain interprets these signals literally. A young graduate enters a job market described as ruthless, hears mentors advise relentless hustle, and constructs a schedule devoid of pause. Coffee replaces sleep, ambition masks anxiety, and social media displays curated evidence of peers achieving faster. Comparison intensifies internal pressure beyond original conditioning. Even wellness culture can quietly reinforce the pattern. Morning routines become elaborate rituals, cold showers, journaling quotas, optimization strategies, framed as self-care, yet executed with rigid self-command. The language shifts from punishment to enhancement, but the tone inside remains coercive. Digital calendars fill months ahead, notifications punctuating every hour, leaving little space for unstructured drift. Silence becomes rare, and rarity increases discomfort when it finally appears. Neuroscience suggests that constant stimulation recalibrates baseline arousal upward, making stillness feel unnerving rather than restorative. The disciplined individual interprets this discomfort as laziness emerging, doubling down on structure. In entrepreneurial spaces, narratives glorify sacrifice, celebrating founders who sleep on office floors and reject balance as weakness. Mythology replaces biology, and exhaustion becomes a badge rather than a signal. Observers admire stamina, unaware of the cumulative physiological toll. Chronic cortisol elevation narrows attention, reduces emotional flexibility, and yet can temporarily enhance focus, creating a deceptive sense of effectiveness. Short-term gains obscure long-term depletion. A mid-career executive schedules back-to-back meetings across time zones, device always within reach, family dinners punctuated by subtle glances at screens. The body remains in mild activation, rarely descending into full rest. Modern systems rarely penalize this pattern immediately. Instead, they amplify it, rewarding output with visibility, income, status, further entrenching the survival loop. The individual appears successful, even exemplary, while internal reserves thin gradually. Microfractures form beneath polished routines. Sleep grows shallow, patience shortens, creativity contracts, yet performance metrics remain stable for a time. The backfire delays itself, accumulating quietly. And eventually, awareness begins not as insight, but as a faint disturbance difficult to ignore. Eventually, the system begins to whisper, not through dramatic collapse, but through subtle dissonance between outer competence and inner depletion. A high performer sits in a meeting, delivering articulate updates, while feeling curiously detached from their own voice. Words flow smoothly, yet meaning feels thin, as if rehearsed by someone slightly removed. Afterward, compliments arrive as usual, but they land without warmth, sliding across a surface that once absorbed validation. The body registers fatigue not solved by sleep. Weekends pass in structured recovery routines, stretching, meal planning, inbox clearing, leaving little room for unstructured idleness. Idleness now feels foreign, almost illicit. Psychologist Carl Jung warned that what remains unconscious directs us from behind, and forced discipline often operates from precisely that unseen position. The internal commander continues issuing instructions, long after the original danger has dissolved. A professional declines a social invitation, citing workload, yet later scrolls aimlessly through news feeds, unable to rest or focus. The refusal of leisure did not produce productivity, only a strange suspension between effort and relief. The backfire rarely announces itself loudly. It appears as procrastination in tasks once handled easily, as irritability toward minor disruptions, as sudden waves of emptiness between achievements. The disciplined identity begins to feel heavy rather than empowering. A parent enforcing strict routines notices their child withdrawing slightly, compliance present but spontaneity fading. In quiet moments, a flicker of recognition surfaces, difficult to articulate. The strategy that once ensured safety now constrains connection. Neuroscience describes how chronic overactivation narrows emotional range, prioritizing efficiency over exploration. Exploration, however, is where creativity and intimacy often reside. When efficiency dominates, life becomes streamlined yet flattened. A couple sits together in the evening, television glowing softly, conversation reduced to logistics for the next day. Both are productive, organized, accomplished, yet something unstructured remains absent. There is no visible crisis, only a muted quality to experience. Psychiatrist Viktor Frankl wrote that humans can endure immense strain if meaning is present, but strain without reflection erodes quietly. Forced discipline without conscious awareness gradually severs effort from purpose. The individual continues achieving, yet cannot clearly answer why urgency persists. A runner who once felt alive during training now tracks, splits obsessively, satisfaction replaced by constant comparison against previous performance. Improvement brings brief relief, quickly replaced by a new threshold. The horizon recedes each time it is reached. Awareness begins as a subtle discomfort during rare pauses. In an unexpected free afternoon, sunlight fills a room, and instead of rushing to structure the time, there is a fleeting urge to simply sit. The urge is followed immediately by anxiety. Two impulses coexist, one demanding action, the other craving stillness. The tension between them exposes the internal hierarchy long maintained. The commanding voice sounds less protective now, more insistent than necessary. Psychologist Donald Winnicott spoke of the true self emerging in moments of unstructured play, yet play feels risky to a system built on vigilance. Risk here is not physical, but existential. Without constant effort, who remains? The question lingers unspoken, yet shapes behavior profoundly. Friends may still admire the discipline. Colleagues may still rely on consistency. Family may still praise reliability. Externally, little changes at first. Internally, however, the narrative shifts subtly from pride to inquiry. The backfire is not failure, but friction between survival strategy and present reality. What once guarded against chaos now guards against aliveness. There is no dramatic revelation, no sudden transformation, only a gradual recognition that force has been mistaken for strength. The pattern does not disappear when seen, but it becomes visible as a pattern rather than identity. And in that visibility, a quiet unease settles, neither condemning nor comforting, simply present.